welcome to my first video for my new YouTube channel. My name's Michael Vleck and I've been a photographer off and on for more years than I care to remember. And the picture that you see in front of you is just a holding image. This is actually something I've been working on. It features a fellow cosplay photographer, Eddie Chung, and this is part of the Eddie Chung Photoshop Challenge. Now, I know what you're thinking. I didn't know Eddie Chung had a Photoshop challenge. Well, neither did he. Until now. I'm going to talk about how I go about solving common problems with photos. And the topic for this video is the dreaded Blinky. So, without further ado, I'm just going to come over into Lightroom. And here is a set of pictures that were taken at Liverpool Comic Con in March 2020. Literally about a week before we entered lockdown and all events for possibly the remainder of this year have been cancelled. So, as you can tell, a very busy event. People are there attending for their own pleasure and benefit. As a photographer, you don't get to spend a lot of time with people, so you have to make every shot count. Now, sometimes you'll end up with a few pictures, and there might be one picture that you think, you know what, that would have been really great if they hadn't blinked. And here's an example. I only managed to get 3 shots of this lady who was cosplaying the Seventh Sister from Star Wars Rebels. And this was one of the pictures I chose. This was another one, which is quite nice. But as you can probably see here, I should have been a little more careful. I accidentally cropped out part of the droid. The third image is much better, except for one problem, which I'm sure you can see straight away. She blinked. Just as a flash went out, she blinked. Now, most people would just mark that down as a dud photo. Normally, if you're lucky, check the back of your screen, you might be able to get one more shot out of them before they start looking a little stressed with you. I'm going to show you how I go about fixing this in Photoshop. Now, before we open these images in Photoshop, I'd just like to go over a couple of subtle differences that exist between the two images. Now, this first image was shot on a 2470 zoom at 58mm, which is where you can see the droid and part of her hand being cropped out of frame. In the subsequent image, which we're going to repair, this was actually shot at 50mm with the same lens shot from exactly the same position. So what we're going to need to do is a bit of scaling to make the desired image match the size of the image we're going to repair. And what we'll do to do next is we'll select both of the images and then we're going to open them up in Photoshop as layers. And this will take a few moments, so what will happen is I'll pause the video while it's loading and then we'll rejoin it shortly afterwards. And we'll say bye-bye to Eddie in the meantime. Now that both images have been loaded in Photoshop, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the topmost layer, which contains the image that we're going to use to do the repair with, and we're going to scale it so that it matches the layer underneath. And to do that, we're just going to grab the opacity slider and we're going to drop that down to about 40% or thereabouts. That's going to allow us to look at the layer underneath and use that as a guide for when we're scaling the image so that we get as close a match as possible. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to transform the image by using Ctrl-T for the free transform tool, and we're going to scale the image down. Till it's about the right sort of size. And we're going to just need to move it around while we're doing this, just so that we can get a better view. And just to make things a little easier, we're just going to zoom in a touch. Okay. Now, as you can see, as we start to move the image, you'll just see it. We're just trying to get it to line up as best we can on the helmet, but also just paying attention to the face. And I would say that's a pretty close match. So what we'll do is we're just going to click the tick to apply the transformation. And now that that's applied the transformation, we're going to go back to the top layer and we're going to take the opacity back up to 100%. And if we zoom out, one of the things that we'll notice is that right down at the bottom here, you can see there's an obvious line, which is the bottom of the top layer. So what we're going to do to get around this is we're going to use a layer mask. So again, selecting the top edge, going to click on Add Layer Mask, and then we're going to invert it by doing Control I. And what that does is it allows us to look through that layer to the layer below. And what we're going to do next is we're going to just zoom in a little bit. We're going to bring back the layer on top to replace the details. And to do that, I'm going to select our brush tool. And we're going to set it about 200 pixels, 80% hardness, should be fine. And we're just going to change our default palette over to white, as white adds in and black takes away, which you'll see shortly as I start painting over. And there you go. You can see straight away that in just a few strokes, we've just brought her face back in. And there you go. You've just repaired the picture. Now, you might decide, depending on how it looks, that you may want to change it a little further. And you can do. You could, in fact, replace the entire helmet. And that's just by doing exactly the same thing. And what we'll do here is we'll just extend this down so that we're now just painting over the edges where we want to bring back the original helmet. Again, as you see, you can see how there's a join that's beginning to form there. And to speed this up, we can use a much larger brush. And that will allow us to bring back the new helmet. all intact. And if we zoom out, there you go. We've gone from an original picture where she was blinking, but we had good composition. And now we've restored the head and we have at least a workable picture, something that we can build on, which will be a topic of a following video.